special co-host tonight, and I have Willy Miranda with me, and he's from the Paradigm Matrix at KCOR. Willy's been interviewed on my show before, and he's joining me tonight as a co-host. It's going to be very exciting. We're having a good time tonight here, and you are listening to Studio A, and I have a wonderful guest for you all this evening. My special guest tonight is Jeff Woolwine, and Jeff Woolwine, let me get you his bio here. He's pretty awesome. He has a new book out, and pretty interesting stuff going on with him. Jeff Woolwine is one of the premier videographers of UFOs in the Phoenix area. And for years, it has been theorized that Native Americans saw UFOs and carved images of them in the local mountains in Phoenix. Jeff Woolwine has proved this to be true by matching his video footage of UFOs to the petroglyph carvings. Jeff also makes a connection between these petroglyphs and the Phoenix lights. He believes that many of the UFOs seen over Phoenix are actually other life forms unknown to us and has found 4 hotspots there for observing them. Jeff also tells the true story of Phoenix and the Mayan tombs and gold that still lie buried under the sacred mountains there. Jeff has been interviewed on many TV and radio talk shows, sharing his extraordinary research, so don't miss this local hero of the UFO community as he presents his UFO footage, taking us deep into the heart of the mystery and wonder of the petroglyphs in the sky. And Jeff has done many new reports in the Phoenix area and on cable TV, also on shows presenting his UFO sightings and rock art theory. Jeff also was in the pilot for the TV show called UFO Hunters, and was published in UFO Magazine. He's all over the place. And you can get on his YouTube channel. It's Petroglyphs in the Sky. And he has his new book out. We're going to talk about that tonight and a lot of other things. So please welcome Jeff Woolwine to the show this evening. Good evening, Jeff. And hi there, Willy.
Hi there.
Hi. Good to hear from you again. Great being here. Thanks so much.
Oh, my pleasure. It's always nice to hear your voice. And it's always great to get updates and see what you're up to. I know you work really hard out there. You're always doing some kind of investigation.
Oh yeah, never stops unless the weather. It gets pretty hot here in the desert. So.
Oh, I bet. And this time of year?
Well, right now it's starting to get a little hot. The window is about ready to close to do any investigations on the mountain. But we still got maybe a couple more weeks left before it starts to get really too hot. The snakes are out now, so we really have to be careful going up on the mountain. As a matter of fact, speaking of snakes, I don't know if I'm sure everyone is aware of the former Sheriff Joe Arpaio here in Phoenix, Arizona. Well, as him and his wife was watching TV in their living room, a rattlesnake came in and bit his wife on the leg. This just happened yesterday. Yeah, so the snakes are out, so we really need to be careful. And that's pretty much what I'm really worried about.
No kidding. Well, she's okay, right?
Right. Well, as far as I know, yeah. So wow. I saw it on Facebook, and then I saw it on the news tonight. So, yeah.
That's something. And really chime in anytime you need to there.
Oh, I'm glad she's okay. I mean, it just goes to show you that's kind of the it's a regular thing down in that area. I remember traveling to Texas, and when I used to do a lot of field service work down there, and one time one of the guys ended up finding a baby rattlesnake in a rental car.
Oh my goodness! Right. Yeah.
So he was obviously freaked out. I mean, I guess those baby rattlesnakes are even worse. They get more venom, or they can't control their venom. So, imagine that experience too.
I ran into many snakes up there on South Mountain here in Phoenix, and a matter of fact, they don't always warn you either. I mean, I was doing a documentary. We had a film crew up there on South Mountain a few years back. And I was walking up to this petroglyph panel, and the guys were setting up, and they were putting the mics on me and stuff. And we had just walked past this bush, and as the guys were micing me up and the cameras were getting set up, I just happened to look down, and I saw 1 curl, 2 curl, 3 curl, and there was a big rattlesnake sitting in that bush that we just passed. And I was like, "Uh-oh, wait a minute, maybe we shouldn't film here right now. Let's slowly get out of here."
Wow.
So yeah. It's pretty scary. And I ran into some of them. Oh, my goodness. When I was up there one time, I was investigating this canyon, and I was all alone. And I was walking up into this big bushy canyon, and all of a sudden just rattles everywhere, all around me. I stepped right into a rattlesnake nest, and I looked up, and there was one rattlesnake on this rock, and he was curling and twisting and shaking and just wigging out. And I was like, oh, my goodness. I was like, oh, I better get out of here, man. You know, so yeah.
How many lives do you have, Jeff?
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my God. I've run into boar up there. I've run into coyotes. I ran into the chalkwalla lizards. Now, they're kind of scary, too. Sometimes, you know, if you're around the nest, they'll chase you. They'll chase after you and hiss at you and stuff, you know. So you really got to be careful up there. And so, yeah, but I'm always ready for it. I carry a bottle of mace with me just in case.
That's not going to do anything against a snake. Oh, go ahead.
You should be carrying something more than that if you got a wild boar up there.
Right. Yeah. And the thing of it is,
or even mountain lions.
Oh, yeah.
Correct?
Yeah. You know, mountain lions are really scarce up there. But I think it was last year, my wife and I was walking on a trail, and we had a baby mountain lion come down out of the rock. He was chasing a mouse or something, and he ran right in front of us. And that was a treat, too, because you hardly ever see mountain lions on South Mountain. You might see them on some of the other mountains, but on South Mountain, it's really rare, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And those boars, those wild pigs up there, now they don't move. They'll stand perfectly still for hours, right? And you'll just walk right up, and you'll think it's a bush, but you can 10 feet away from it. He'll move, man, and he'll take off, you know. But he just won't move. He just stands there, you know. And I was like, oh my God. So yeah, it gets dangerous up there. You really got to watch your step.
No kidding.
Yeah, I go packing if I would be up there, and I'm not talking about packing a backpack. I'm talking about packing.
Yeah, you know, the first park ranger here, Charles Holbrook, back in the late 30s and early 40s. You know, there was a trail. There's a trail called Javelina Trail, and the reason why it's called that is because Holbrook was walking on this trail, and he always carried some 6-shooters with him. He always was packing his 6-shooters. And this javelina came running at him. I described this in my book. I put it in my book. And this javelina come running after him, and he shot him right there, right before the javelina pounced on him. And so that's how that trail got named, was Javelina Trail, is because Charles Holbrook put one down right there. So that's the reason why it's called the Javelina Trail, right? Yeah, there's a lot of history in my book that I've uncovered, and it hasn't been talked about in the last 80 years. That's all in my first book. So.
And tell me about your book. It's The Phoenix Lights, Petroglyphs in the Sky, Landscapes for the Spirits. I love that. The True Stories, Myths, Legends, and UFOs over Phoenix, Arizona, Volume 1, right?
Right, yeah. The book was, it took me like 15 years to get it done. Another 5 years to find some publishers. And when they finally got it, they finally, agreed to publish it, because I ran into a couple of publishers. They didn't want to do it. It was just too big and too complex. And so these publishers decided to, they were going to do it, but because of all the color photographs and because of all the information and because it was just so huge, they decided to break it up into 2. And I'm not really happy with it, because, it was written as one book. The first book follows the second book. The second book follows the first book. It's all, supposed to be one book. So, but they got the first one done. It's been out for about a year now, and I'm waiting for the second one to be published. And, the first one goes in pretty much to the lost history of Phoenix. And it's written as a type of movie. So the reader is following John through the mountains and through the history of Phoenix. And this chief is explaining to John and the reader what the glyphs mean. It goes into the lost history of Phoenix. It goes into the stuff that isn't talked about anymore. And it's like a story adventure. Going into this, I always thought, for myself, it's not a UFO sighting, but it's an adventure, because I took my sightings a step further. I was the first one to go up on the mountain and actually watch the mountain and prove that, hey, these petroglyphs, are talking about these things in the sky. And no one has ever documented this, ever. It's always been a theory. Oh, well, we think the Native Americans, saw things. We think that's what they were talking about, but no one has actually proven it, over the years as much as I have done. And so, and once, the first 2 or 3 sightings, when I saw the same thing in the sky and the same things carved on the rocks, I knew I was onto something. I knew I was right. And that's why I called my research petroglyphs in the sky, because the petroglyphs that we're seeing on the rocks is in the sky. That's exactly what's going on here. So,
yeah, I like the way you talk about the petroglyphs being doorways or access points, right?
Right. The spirals. South Mountain in Phoenix, Arizona. It's about 70 to 80% of spirals. Now, spirals aren't representing water, but representing doorways. And it's actually doorways for these spirits, for these things that we're seeing in the sky. And you can actually track them. You can track them through the sun, and they follow the equinox and the solstice. So it has everything to do with the energy lines, the ley lines, the fault lines, and the positioning of the sun. And when the sun gets in the right position, it opens up these doorways on the mountains. And that's why, some months you'll see them a lot, and then other months you won't see them, as much. So it's a pattern, actually.
And you've noticed that, but most people wouldn't pick up on that. That's so interesting about your work. I love that. You really understand the language.
Yeah, it's pretty neat, and I didn't have anybody to really, teach me anything. This is all firsthand. I witnessed all of this. I learned all of this on my own. I followed the UFOs to the mountains. I watched the mountains. I studied the petroglyphs. I hiked the mountains so many times. I learned the myths and the stories and the legends of the mountains around the Valley of the Sun. And, going into this, I'm thinking, wow, this is great. And then now that I understand what it's all meaning, what it all is, I can understand why, the people in high officials that know about these things, because, yes, there are black helicopters flying around, and, yes, there are little white airplanes. They're watching these things, too. They're watching the lights. And so I understand, because I learned the history of it, and I understand now why they're not telling us about these things. It's because, it's kind of a scary thing. And a lot of people aren't ready for this. When I was doing the UFO History Show, and when I was doing the UFO Hunter Show on the History Channel back in 2005, when I first, presented my discoveries to the public, they're telling me, dude, you're filming some bizarre things. You can't go saying spirits. You can't go saying living entities. You can't go saying fallen angels. You can't go saying all this stuff. You have to refer these things as craft, as UFO craft. He's like, the people are not ready for this yet. He's like, you're filming some crazy stuff, man. They're not ready for this. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, they better get ready for it, because it's here. This is what's really going on here. It's, in my opinion, it's not a spaceship that we're looking at. Sure. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, there could be crafts out there. Matter of fact, I have seen some things in the sky over South Mountain and also in New York when I lived there that could resemble a craft. And I get this. Yeah, I've seen a black triangle. Yeah, I've seen some flying jacks. Yeah, that could be a craft. Sure, But I think what the majority of the people are seeing here is something different. I think they're living entities. Now, the petroglyphs show these entities, these phoenix lights, these little white dots, orange dots, yellow dots, black dots, morphing into a man. They actually transform themselves into a man, and that's what the glyphs say. You know what? I actually, for years, I'm thinking I'm talking about this. I'm like, look, this orb is morphing into a person. He's morphing into a snake. He's morphing into a cross. He's morphing into something different, and then I actually witnessed it. I saw it, man. Me and my wife saw it out there on South Mountain. We're sky watching. We found this real neat place to watch these entities on the mountains out here. And first we saw this white light out there. And so I turned on the camera and I started filming. And this white light this bright light in the sky. All of a sudden, this black thing seemed to come out of it, and it looked like a snake. And it really looked like Quetzalcoatl from Mexico. And as it moved across the sky, it was changing. It was shape-shifting. And by the time it was done, it looked like a stick-figured carved guy with his hand on his hip, and he with a head and two horns coming out of his head. Now, he went across the sky, and then I lost him in some mountains there. But it was really crazy. It was really intense. And that just verified everything. You know, these lights, these things that we're seeing in the sky, they actually transform into other beings.
Mm-hmm. That's very, very interesting. So what do you think is creating that? Do you think there's some kind of a frequency that's altering the image itself, or what do you think is causing it to kind of morph?
Yeah, I just think, I'm kind of looking at this as, because, you know, we call ourselves, you know, we're humans, we're a type of animal, you know, and I think these things are a type of animal. They're just they're just higher. They're more advanced. I'm not going to say technology because that's not what it is, but they're just more advanced. They're spirits. They're living beings, if you will, you know. Just as the oceanographers are finding new species of life below the ocean, this is a new species of life above the ocean that the scientists and a lot of other people fail to recognize. They just think it's just a myth. You know, they haven't really studied it, or if they have, they're not talking about it because of the history of these things. You know, and they don't want to admit it. You know, so oh my God, the archaeologist here, whew, boy, I've gotten into it with him a few times, man. I tell you what, you know, yeah, you know, but you know, that archaeologist here in Phoenix now, that's a whole new ball game in itself, let me tell you. But yeah, you know,
are they pretty rigid? They just don't want to open their mind to the possibility, huh?
Well, you know, there's a lot of stuff that he left out. You know, he wrote his book, and him and his team spent 5 years up here on South Mountain documenting the petroglyphs and this and that. Mm-hmm. And he left a lot out. You know, he doesn't go into the first park ranger, you know, Charles Holbrook. He doesn't explain that he doesn't tell people that there's tombs up here, you know, and there's, you know, most of his book is what he drew. Okay, there's some photographs, but those photographs are really kind of small in his book, and he drew most of the glyphs in his book. Now, some of them are wrong, or he left a lot out, you know? So, for instance, there's a petroglyph out there with a guy, a stick-figure guy, and he's looking up at a barbell UFO in the sky. Now, he draws it as the man having a regular round head. But when you go and actually see the petroglyphs for yourself, it's an elongated head. It's a long head, like you see in Peru and then the mummies and things like that, and the elongated skull. But he left that out, you know.
I wonder if he did that on purpose. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a type of cover up, because you know, 80 years ago when Holbrook was here. Now, I go into this in my book. When Charles Holbrook was here, the Indians entrusted him. They told him about, you know, the spirits in the sky, and he told them about the Mayans that were here, and he told them about the tombs that were here. You know, and he was here to guard the tombs, to make sure nobody buried or dug up the tombs. And he actually passed out flyers. He did tours. I do tours on the mountain, and he does tours. He did tours too. And he talked about the tombs, and he showed the tomb, you know. And he talked about the gold that was buried here from the Mayans. He talked about the spirits in the sky. He talked about the spirits not only in the sky, but in the ground also. You know, so he was going into a lot of crazy stuff, you know. And, you know, back then, people are looking for gold. So he actually, you know, he had to chase a lot of hoodlums away from people digging up the tombs and things like that. There was a lot of vandalism going on, you know, because of this information that got leaked out. And so he was there, you know, to protect it, to make sure nothing was disturbed. You know, it's interesting, too, because for years, back in his day, it was a rumor that the Spanish conquistadors constructed 4 crosses in stone. And his documents that I uncovered explains that he says it must have taken a mighty army to construct these stones because they were so huge. And for years they were lost. It was for years it was just a rumor until one day he was up on a hill and he describes that he looked down, and when he did, he saw the sun-blackened rock, all erected into a cross. And that was the spot. There was 4 crosses up there on the east side of South Mountain. And
That's cool.
For a year he kept this a secret. He didn't tell anybody a secret until the city of Phoenix made a new map of South Mountain. And on that map they put a hill. They put a hill and where the crosses were located at. Well, he made the mistake and he told people, well, you know what's on that hill? There's crosses there. And at that time, everybody was looking for gold. Everyone's trying to dig up a tomb. So late at night, some hoodlums went up there and destroyed the crosses, dug up a hole, and looking for gold. They didn't find anything. And the next morning, when Holbrook found out, he was pretty pissed about it. And he wanted the city of Phoenix to go up there and construct them, put them all back together. And this went on for months, man. And he was pissed. He wanted the city of Phoenix to help him out. City of Phoenix denied it, but he says, hey, if you and your friends can go up there and put them back together if you want, but we're not going to finance it. You can do it if you want, but we're not going to have anything to do with it. So the documents go on to say that everybody, all his friends, even the Boy Scouts, and the wives, it was neat because the wives and some of the kids were down there making sandwiches and lemonades for all the construction crews, and the men were carrying all this concrete and stones up the mountain, and it says it looked like a whole bunch of ants going up the mountain, erecting these crosses again, putting the crosses back up. Then the story ends when it says that one of his good friends had a heart attack, and that's when the story ends. I couldn't find anything else to that.
Interesting.
Later on, I did see the map that he was talking about. I did see that, but then I saw another map many years later, and they were saying the crosses was on the west side. Now, I've been on both sides looking for these crosses to this day, and I believe that they're no longer around. I think that they were over there on the east side because this is where there was carvings of the first Spanish conquistadors. There's a petroglyph carving out there with a date on it and a name. And, back then the city of Phoenix was going to tear that up and move it. They were going to move it into the museum. Holbrook didn't want no part of that. The construction crew went up there to dig it up, and he actually pulled the guns on him, man. He's like, dude, you are not touching this rock. You are not touching these carvings, If you do, we're gonna shoot out. We're gonna fight. This rock needs to stay here. This is history. We can't move it. And so months went by, and I talk about this in the book, and I show photographs of this rock that I'm talking about. And so the mayor says, "Okay, Charlie, meet us up there at that mountain there. Meet us over there tomorrow morning, okay?" And he didn't tell them. They didn't tell Charles, what was going to happen. And so Charles was thinking, man, I'm going to go to war with these guys. I'm going to shoot them. They're going to try to dig up this rock, and I'm going to kill them, dude. So he was all ready to ambush the construction workers. Well, the construction workers, they drove up in this truck, and they had shovels in their hands, and they had a whole bunch of work crews with them and stuff, and they all jumped out. And what did they bring with them? They brought concrete and bars, and they barred up that rock forever. And to this day, that rock has bars overlapping that petroglyph with the date on it. To this day, you can still see it. And it was Charles Holbrook that saved that rock. Now, looking for the crosses, I'm thinking those crosses because that's what this old map said. Old map said it was about, northeast of where that carving is on this hill. And so back in the day, South Mountain on the east side, it extended way further. It was a lot longer than what it is today. And at the time, this map is showing a cemetery. There was a lot of cemeteries from the Holocaust and the Indians all along the east side of South Mountain. And so the city of Phoenix, they decided to blow up that side of the mountain and put golf courses on the cemeteries and put condominiums and houses and also put a restaurant up on that hill on the east side of South Mountain. And it's called Rustler's Roost to this day. Mm. And the Indians were pissed. They're like, oh, my God. So they were protesting. They were protesting the golfers. They were protesting the construction crews. This went on through the whole time that they were destroying stuff up there on South Mountain, making this restaurant and making the condos and making the apartments and houses and making the golf courses. And the Indians were saying, curse to all these construction workers and curse to the golfers who are going to play on our sacred land. I mean, they were pissed, dude. And there's a the owner of Wrestler's Roost. His father was the guy there that was first there for that restaurant. And I've tried to get interviews with this guy, and he just will not talk to me about this at all, man. This is hush hush. This is, you don't talk about it no more, And so I believe when they were blowing up that east side of that mountain, they blew up the cross. It's true, because I can't find it. I've been to both spots on both those maps. And the one that the city of Phoenix says that the crosses are at now today, there's no way the crosses would. There's too many cactuses there. There's absolutely no way those crosses would be in a bunch of patches of cactus. But on the east side, yeah, that's very possible. That's probably where they were. So,
and what did they look like? Oh, go ahead, Billy.
Oh, I said, what a shame! Such a shame.
It is.
Yeah, I know, and you know what's going on now. I believe it's already completed. They haven't really ran it yet, but for the past 5 years, the city of Phoenix has been talking about building a freeway on the west side of South Mountain, and it's going to connect. It's going to go through the Indian. It's going to go like right past the Indian reservation onto the connecting freeway going to Tucson. And the Indians were pissed about that too. They've been protesting and protesting. They did not want that freeway going through the west side of South Mountain and blah, blah, blah. The city of Phoenix got their way anyway. And so now, last week or the week before, I think they just now completed that freeway, and it should be up and running soon. And that's pretty cool too, because you know why? Because that's where the original 1997 Phoenix Lights happened at. Was right there on the west side of South Mountain. So it's only a matter of time someone's going to be driving on that freeway and they're going to see the lights, man. They're going to see them because that's where they hang out at, So that's the only good thing about it.
Right.
Hey, Jeff, I got a two-part. Jeff, Willie here. I got a two-part question here as far as the Native American Indians that are in Phoenix, reside in Phoenix for the millennia. They've had obviously, they've had contact with these lights, correct?
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
And you think it's still ongoing that they're contacting these tribes, and have all the tribes have had contact with these lights?
Okay. Let's go on to the history of all this. Let's go on to when everything first happened. The story goes on to say that. Now, okay, so the Hohokam Indians, the name Hohokam is a name given by the Pima Indians, who consider themselves ancestors to the Hohokam. Now, the Hohokam means the people who are missing, the people who got taken away, the people who are gone, because we don't know what happened to these people. These people lived here for 1,000 years. They were masters of canal systems. They were supposedly a peace-loving race here. They lived on this land in this Valley of the Sun for 1,000 years until something happened, and boom, they're gone. Just like all the other tribes around the world, we find a tribe that was living on the earth in a certain spot, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're gone. You know, even when me and you move, we take our belongings with us. But yet the Holocom people didn't. They were here and just disappeared, gone, left everything behind. Now, the archaeologist wants us to believe, well, they just got too hot here and they migrated somewhere else, you know. Okay, if that's the truth, where did they go? There is no evidence, no trace of where they went. If they migrated somewhere else, if they left this valley to go somewhere else, then we would find the spot where they went to. This is not the case. They were here, gone, that was it. Now, the story goes on to say that when they first arrived here, when the Holocoms first got here, they didn't know how to live. So these things came up out of the sand world, and they taught these people how to live. They taught these people how to survive. And
how to farm, basically like how to farm and how to live off the land.
How to farm, yeah, you know. Yeah, they taught them the secret knowledge. It was a secret. These people were smart, man. The Holocoms, they weren't dumb. They didn't live very long. Matter of fact, I think to be like 24 years of age was considered elderly to them. So it was a bunch of young people walking around up here for 1,000 years. They didn't live very long, but they had the secret knowledge. They were very smart. They knew what was going on. And I think it had everything to do with these things in the sky, the spirits of the earth and the sky. Now, they're just like in Mexico, where we find the altars of sacrificing and things like that. I find the altars here also. I show photographs. I talk about it in my book. And not only do we find Holocom petroglyphs there, carvings, but we also find Mayan carvings there, which the archaeologist doesn't talk about, but it's truly there. I mean, because the evidence is there. And so it was not only the Holocoms, but the Mayans. And you know what? At that time, South Mountain was called Mount Sapoa, Mountain of Mercy. And this was a very sacred spot. I mean, tribes from all over the place came to this mountain for trade, worship, and just to watch the crazy things going on in the sky. I mean, it was an event. I mean, this mountain was so sacred, you know, because of what was going on here. You know, that tribes from all over the valley, all over the United States was migrating here to watch what was going on. And we know that other tribes are here through the pottery shards. So we can't really carbon date the petroglyphs. You know, we can't, determine on when the glyphs were carved. But we can carbon date the pottery shards, and we can determine because each land has different types of dirt. You know, like Oklahoma has red dirt. You know, we have like the brown dirt here. There's different types of dirt. So the pottery shards are telling us that, these pots came from a different land. It's not all, here in the South Mountains. So we know other people were here, for trade, for worship, to gather.
Correct. Yeah, there must have been a lot of trade routes between these civilizations. Especially if you see petroglyphs of the Aztecs in those areas.
Right. Absolutely right. And then everything was going on fine until one day they just disappeared. Now, like I said, the archaeologists, they say, they just migrated, it got too hot, they went somewhere else. But the petroglyphs and the legends say that these things came from the east. Now, some natives that I've talked to, they say the devil came from the east and took the people away. Now, this coincides with the petroglyphs that I found up here on the mountain. It's showing these phoenix lights, these flying serpents, these flying dots, picking people up by the head and carrying them off into the sky. There's a lot of petroglyphs depicting this. And when this was going on, there were people watching this. Now, when all this was going down, there was Indians that were afraid, and they ran in the cave, and they watched what was going on. And when it was all over with, they were scared. They were terrified. And they knew that if they were going to continue to live in this valley, that eventually they'd have to go back to war with these spirits of the earth and sky. So they buried all their gold. They buried everything in these tombs around South Mountain. And they got out of here, and they vowed never to come back into this valley. They said, this valley is cursed. This is cursed. This is a cursed land. And nobody lived here for hundreds of years. And they all migrated back to Mexico. They stopped at Casa Grande, and they taught the people there how to build canals and how to erect structures to orient with the equinox and the summer solstice and to watch the sun. And they stayed there in Casa Grande for about a couple years before they ended up going back to Mexico. But they told, look, dude, you do not. They told people, don't go to that land. Don't go to that valley over there, man. There's sun devils there, man. You do not want to step into that land. So all the tribes, there were tribes on the outskirts of this valley. You know, nothing was touched. Nobody came back in here to gather the pots, to gather anything else. This was a cursed land. They never stepped foot on this land again. And so, yeah, right, you know, and, you know, there were Indians watching the Phoenix Lights and watching all this crazy stuff. But they were afraid, man. They're not going to step foot on this land, you know, so, and they didn't, you know, for
Is it still like that now, though? I mean, are people still superstitious with the mountain itself?
You know, some of the natives that I've talked to, yeah, you know, when I first got into this, you know, when I made the connection with the Phoenix Lights to the petroglyphs, it all happened, you know, so quick. You know, it all came in, it just kind of fell into my lap, I guess you could say. You know, there was a Native American, I believe he was a shaman also from the Choctaw tribe, and Choctaw, I didn't say.
Choctaw.
And, yeah. And he works over here at the Pueblo Indian Art Museum in downtown Phoenix. And he was up on, he was doing a tour on South Mountain, and I saw him on television on one of the public access channels here on Channel 8. And he was describing the petroglyphs. And one of the guys that he was with, you know, he says, hey, you know, this stick figure man looks like he's looking up at something in the sky. And his name was Dave Morris. And Dave turned around and said, yes, you know, that's part of the story here, is that it's possible that our ancestors saw and recorded things in the sky. Well, that just set off a light bulb in my head. I'm like, wait a minute, we got strange lights in the sky. Now we have strange markings on the rocks out here. There has to be a connection. So I called up this guy, and I booked a tour. And, you know, before I called him, I had already made the news in 2004 talking about the lights, showing the lights on Channel 10, Channel 3, Channel 5, Channel 15. I mean, I was all over the news in the summer of 2004. And the end result was we were all seeing flares. And I'm like, dude, we're not seeing flares 150 miles away in Tucson. Okay, these lights are here. They're at the mountain. They're on the east side of South Mountain. That's where I'm watching it. There's no way these are flares, you know? So in 2005, I moved to the mountain on the east side to get a better look. I moved about a mile away from South Mountain, you know, just to watch and to see what was going on. And when I did, that's when I contacted Dave. And I'm like, dude, you know, I didn't tell him who I was, you know, what I was doing. I just told him, look, you know, I'm kind of, I'm making a documentary. You know, I saw you on Channel 8. You know, you're talking about the petroglyphs. I want to know, you know, can you go up there and tell me about the glyphs and stuff? So he's like, sure, you know. So we met up on the mountain, me and a friend of mine and Dave. And my friend, he recorded most of it. And as we're walking on the land there, you know, he's telling me some crazy stuff. Now, at the time, because the rumor is March 13th, 1997, oh, this massive craft, this massive solid spaceship went over Phoenix. Okay, so I wasn't there in 1997. I didn't see that event. I saw him, you know, like at 1999, and then I started recording him in 2004. And I wasn't seeing a craft, you know, I'm seeing lights, you know, I wasn't seeing a spaceship, I'm just seeing lights, you know. Mm-hmm. And when we get up to the spirals, he's explaining to me, yeah, these spirals actually represent doorways. And he's telling me that, when the spiral ends like at a crack of the stone, that crack in the stone is the doorway. And at the time I'm thinking, how can a big spaceship get into a little crack like that? Man, oh my God, it's just, how is that even possible, right? Until I actually didn't witness this crap, but I witnessed these creatures, these entities. Now it's neat, it's cool. I understand why the natives call these things spirits, because when they're coming out of the sky, they're like solid, they're full, they're changing, they're shapeshifters. Sometimes they change colors. All right, when they get down to the mountain, you can see this in my videos. When they get close to that mountain, they change. You can kind of see through them. They're like a ghost. There's no noise. There's no shadow. They're cruising across the landscape, and all of a sudden they disappear into a stone. They just involve themselves in the stone. Right, they're gone into the stone. Same way when they're coming out. You can see through them until they get a little higher up on the mountain, and when they get about 1,000 feet up on the mountain, that's when they start changing shape and they become more solid. And that's what the petroglyphs describe. Some of the petroglyphs show there's a spiral doorway, and then we have like a lizard, right? And this lizard is coming out of the door. But first, he's a spirit. He's a shadow. They picked it. They carved it in such a way that it's not a full lizard. He's like a real outline of a lizard, but then next to him is the full body of a lizard. So the artist is trying to tell us that this lizard came out of the doorway, and he was a ghost. He was a spirit. You could see through him, and then later on he became more solid. It's exactly what these things are doing. And he was going into the giants. Now the giants, I found carvings of giants out here, and I found there's tombs out here in which there's the doors, the way they blocked off the doors here. They put huge stones in front of these doors on some of these tombs out here, and there's one spot where they actually broke up this huge slab of stone, and they broke it up and they pushed it across, and then they picked up one huge slab of stone, must have weighed at least maybe 1,000 pounds, and it was actually thrown into that spot. And how you can tell it was thrown? Because it bounced off the canyon wall there, man. You can see the scrapes, dude. It was thrown there, man. Bam, 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 scrape, 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 all the way down. And it's been sitting there to this day. And you can clearly tell that slab of stone was normally on the other side of the rock, because it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You can tell. So the giants are carved here. There's evidence of the giants that were here, in my opinion. It's really neat, too, because on the west side of Phoenix, we have a mountain called the Superstition Mountain. Now, everybody's all, into, the Lost Dutchman's gold mines out there. Well, sure, but you know what? That mountain is a lot more interesting than just the gold, okay? The Indians say that when the giants were here, okay, and the flood was coming, the giants got scared. And they told, the lead giant told his people to run over here on this rock. And the lead giant used his powers to move the stone up, but the rock kept coming, the water kept coming. The giant, again, raised the mountain, raised this rock up again, and the water kept coming. He raised this rock up so high, but the water was coming, and at his last bit of strength, because he didn't want his people to die, he turned them all into stone and created himself. And that's when the water stopped. And to this day, you can look at the Superstition Mountains, and you can see the water line where the water had stopped, way high up on the rock there, and then you can see the giants all turned to stone. The family of giants all turned to stone up there on top of the mountain, and the main giant on the bottom of the mountain, he's kind of like praying, So it's a real neat story. And there's other giants here, like Camelback Mountain. There's a giant turned to stone there on that mountain. In Red Rock, Sedona, there's a giant that has been turned to stone there too.
That's interesting.
It's fascinating.
Yes, it is. Now, it's Jeff. As far as the conquistadors, have you seen through your research any more depictions or or any stories depicted by the conquistadors as far as the lights themselves and their interactions with the lights, or the or any of the anything that was documented by any of the priests that were, of course, wherever the conquistadors were. Of course, the church was there also. I mean, the conquistadors were basically the strong arm of the Jesuits, which were the strong arms of the Catholic Church, and the conquistadors basically almost conquered the world. They conquered all the way up to the Philippines, as a matter of fact. So, have you seen anything through your research that any stories from the conquistadors themselves?
Yes, absolutely. There's tons of evidence, photographic evidence in my book. We'll go over just a small part of it because I don't want to give it out too much. I mean, because there's a lot of evidence, because to this day, the archaeologists won't admit that the Spanish ever made it this far. They said they went a different route. But yet, there's tons of evidence and proof and artifacts.
You had crosses crosses up there in that mountain.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the Indians wouldn't be doing crosses.
Right, absolutely right. So there are spots around South Mountain where we have petroglyphs depicting I guess you could say evil entities, evil spirits, scary things, doorways, stuff like that. And then there's a cross. There's a cross carved right up on top, and you can tell that it's a recently new carved cross. It's not Hocom cross. It's something, it's like a priest actually kind of maybe blessed this stone because he knew the story. He knew what was in this stone. He knew what this stone was all about, And
yes.
In my book, it's really cool too because there's a depiction of a king. All right, there's a carving of a king, and it's really neat. It's in this valley of these two pyramid hills. Okay, and one of the ways to understand these petroglyphs is by the direction that they're looking. For instance, a coyote or a deer. Okay, so there's a panel depicting a story, spirits, spirals, what had happened in that area, and then you look at the coyote and he's looking north. So you want to follow the way he's looking. So you want to go north. And when you go a little bit further, you find the next story, okay? And that's how one of the ways you can find these glyphs is through the animals, on which direction they're pointing and which direction they're looking. They're forever looking in sacred spots. This is how sometimes you can find the tombs and things like that. You follow the glyphs of what the coyotes are pointing to. Now, some of the deers, this is really neat too, like the deers, the antlers, you'll look at the antlers, and the antlers will be going all these crazy directions, and it doesn't look like a normal deer antler. It looks kind of squiggly this and squiggly that and kind of weird, But when you step back, because when you look at the petroglyphs, you're not just supposed to look at the art, but you're supposed to include the whole landscape, because the artist is including the landscape in with the art. So when you look at the deer and you step back,
And Jeff, hang on for a second there. We're heading for a break. Everybody listen to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm your host, Solaris BlueRaven. My wonderful guest is Jeff Woolwine, and Willy Miranda is joining me as co-host. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.